We all know that the road to the House majority runs through California, and boy, haven't you seen this just all over the place because we are constantly saying it. But this new LA Times illustration is just absolutely one of my favorite ways to show it. Because right here, if we can make sure that we keep the number of red districts down and keep the number of blue districts up, we really can take back the House this year and stop some of the insanity. Remembering that we have 435 in the House, so a majority requires 218 seats. And look how close it's getting. And, everybody just visualize a few more resignations, right? What's a few more resignations among enemies or anything, right? So anyway, if we can flip 5 purple districts and we got to hold that 6th blue seat in California, we get there. And of course, we want to get way further than this, but this is our starting place. So let's remember that the voters have spoken, and even CA 45, which was a little bit slower to finalize because it was very, very close between Derek and Kim until the very end. But we've got everybody now, and these are our districts and these are our people. So we took the disclaimer off our website that said no implied endorsement. And the answer is we are totally implying our endorsement now because the voters have spoken. So here we are. So our theme tonight is 6 and 6, 6 candidates, 6 years and 6 months. So the 6 candidates, yay, we've got them. We wanted to know where that would go. The next part of this is 6 years, because 6 years ago, we were so underwater from the primary. And yet, from being underwater in that primary, we got there. And you remember how exciting in the blue wave it was to flip 7 House seats. A lot of things are different, but a few things are the same or even better. So we're going to talk about that tonight. The third 6 is 6 months, because that's how much time we have to get people registered and engaged before the drop boxes open on October 7th. So it's very soon, very, very soon now, but it's 6 months instead of 3 months or 4 months. So like it used to be in California, so it's a better thing. I hope that my colleagues will put in the chat the Action Network sign up, because we're especially interested in group leaders signing up for our special mailing list on Action Network, which is a targeted rapid response mailing list. We still want you to be on our big MailChimp mailing list, which is now over 1,000 people, we are proud to say. But for group leaders, we want to have the ability to engage specially, and Nancy will be able to talk about that more later. But we want to assign you a buddy to work with you, and we want to create community that you can do. We want you to invite you to our soon to open Slack channel, Slack workspace, the public Slack workspace for the Alliance. And we just want you to be able to engage. So there's the address. All right, I want to promo our next event, which is, okay, today is the 4th, and this event's going to be on the 24th. So just 20 days away. And are we excited or what? Because, hello, Katie Porter agreed to speak to our group, and Ben Weckler, the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, agreed to speak to us, and our own wonderful Jessica Craven, the activist who writes Chop Wood, Carry Water Every Day, is also speaking. So how exciting is that? So there will also be people posting in the chat, and also, of course, you'll get an email so you can sign up for Power in the House. We think we're going to have a lot of fun that night. And no, that one won't be an hour. It'll be a 90-minute session because we have so much to celebrate and to kick off. So here we are with our primary election recap. And the first question we want to ask is, does the blue wave offer us lessons? So we know that we got to sweep 6 districts. We know that's what we want to do, but what context can we learn? So my first question is, do you remember what this felt like? Okay, in June 2018, all 6 of the combined candidates in these districts were underwater. They didn't reach 50%, let alone go over 50%. So that's what things look like. And of course, we know there's been redistricting and musical chairs and people in and people out and all that kind of stuff. But still, it's what we can look at and understand what happened and remember how it felt in November 2018 because this is what happened. Look at those beautiful numbers. Wow. And yeah, TJ Cox got to 50.4%, but then again, Katie Hill was at 54.4 and Harley was at 53.6. Katie Porter at 52.1. So that was doable. And that was when we didn't know nearly as much as we know now. So I just want us to say, okay, what does that mean about where we are now? Well, this is what it looks like now in each of these districts, not for an individual candidate, but for votes for Dems. All right. So it's always at least 45%. And in a couple of districts, it's higher than 45%. So we're glad about that. So with presidential year turnout, we can do it again. Look at that. I think that's a pretty exciting slide myself, because that's what we got to do. That's what we can do. That's what we want to do. Okay, so let's talk about primary turnout. We know that Californians didn't really show up a lot. We didn't have a competitive presidential primary on either side. Some of the other things that might goose primary turnout just weren't present. So we had what we called, politely called, muted turnout, averaging only 35% statewide. Wasn't the worst we've ever had, and it was definitely not the best we've ever had. So here's what that looks like in our 6 districts, 13 through 47. So it ranged from a low turnout percentage, and this is all voters, both blue, red, and NPP and third party, of 20% to a high in CA 47, where there are higher engagement levels of 40%. So one district that's historically been fiercer about these things turned out double what the other one, but that's what it looked like. But I think that's not nearly as important as looking at the next thing. Look how many people who were registered didn't vote. There are at least 250,000 people in every one of these districts who, in the March primary, for whatever reason, did not vote. So these 250,000, and in some cases it's 300,000. That light yellow, that light gold color, that's people, bunch of people that we have to turn out, and we can turn out. So those are already registered. So that's what we're talking about. And you can see the ends, but we measured it based on percentages. Okay, so what could happen in the general? Well, all right. We took and I got to thank my colleagues. Oh my gosh, got to thank Steve Murphy, got to thank Larry Martin, got to thank Peter Hosey, got to thank Marty Behrens, and got to thank a bunch of other good proofers and good thinkers. But essentially, in working up this data story, we took a look at presidential year general turnout for the last 3 cycles so that we could figure out what we could consider appropriate to take a look at. And essentially what that tells us, and here is one of Marty's fancy graphs, what that tells us is that we should probably expect a turnout of at least 76.1% in the general election this year. All right, I don't expect you to decode this slide. You don't have time, but I'm going to make it a little easier for you. Just looking at the gold part at the bottom, that's the primary turnout, 37.5 way back in the blue wave year of 2018. But when you get to the general election, you're at 64.5, and we got the win. Oh gosh, yay. Okay. Now let's take a look at what happened in 2022, where we're still licking our wounds a little bit from 2022, although we're so proud that some of the states, the battleground states, really came through, but some states that weren't seen as battlegrounds, there wasn't as much attention. All right, what happened here? Turnout only went from 33% in the primary to 50%. And with only that much of a bump, we didn't get a win. It wasn't enough to win. But take a look at this. we already know we got 35% turnout overall across the state of California, and we know to expect a 76% turnout in the general. So look at that gap. Look how much fun that's going to be to see if we can jump that gap. Okay, so registrations are another thing we got to look at. Let's first look at who's registered and also look at the universe of who's available to register based on the citizenship and being at least 18 years old. All right, so potential registration here, those numbers on the left talk about not only who is registered, but they also add in who could be registered. So interestingly enough, here we see what the distribution is. Now, some people would say, wait a minute, are CA 13 and CA 22 not properly districted? No, that's not why. First of all, there are fewer people with US citizenship in those two districts proportional to the overall population. But it is those are such young districts that we have lots of young people in those districts who have not yet aged into voting. So overall, we have fewer numbers. So that's kind of the good news and the bad news, depending on glass half full, glass half empty. But anyway, here's what we've got available to us. If you look at the gray amount, what's available to us is essentially between 70,000 and 110,000 more people who are available to register and who are called eligible voters by the California Secretary of State. So that's basically, you see the N over on the left, it's basically 550,000 people. Last fall, we calculated it was 558,000, but now it's looking at like 549.9, so basically 550. Okay, so can we register more Democrats? Well, that's an interesting question. So let's take a look at what might be going on here. All right, so the first question is that Democrats typically are comprising in these 6 districts, not across California as a whole, but our 6 target battleground districts are comprising 35 to 40% of the registered voters. And then the middle group of voters, some of whom will vote blue with us, some of whom will vote red with the other guys, and some of whom are anybody's guess. But anyway, we have NPPs in the low double digits or even 8 or 9%, and we have third parties in there. And between the NPPs and the third parties, that's given us up to 30% more in some of these districts in the 20s. So essentially, that's who we've got, the R's, the Dems, and the others. But look what happens if we register people among the available people and just assume this is a Larry Martin special calculation, our engineer hero, Larry Martin, where he essentially said, okay, what proportion of registrants typically register as Dems? Now, what can I do to apply that ratio to the available registrants? And here's what we can do. We know that probably we could add 10% to the number in CA13. So basically, if you look here and you see how far under the 50% line we are, and then look at this and see how much closer it pushes to 50%, even before we attract any NPP voters. So it's not unchallenging. It's very challenging, but it's here and it's doable. So let's look at these voters a different way. This is a different way that Marty presented this so that we can memorize these numbers of who's available. All right, the smallest number is in CA27. And Joey, I want to say thank you to you and all the people who have been registering voters for years and years and years in CA27. So you've got less of an overhang of unregistered people. And we know you're still doing it every day, every week, 12 months of the year. So thank you for doing that. And the largest group is in CA13 with 43,000. So basically, these are our target numbers of people that we think could register as Dems, vote as Dems. So wow, that's pretty exciting. All right, so then we have another question. Can we turn out our already registered base? All right. There's a concept that Steve and Marty talk about a lot called headroom. All right. So, this is the idea about headroom. Essentially, take a look at CA 13 as an example, the one on the far left. Essentially, 49% of the people who were registered Republicans showed up for that primary where they were voting for John Duarte because that was the GOP incumbent that they were voting for. Only 28% of the people who were registered as Dems showed up for our primary to vote for Adam Gray. Okay, well, that could be alarming on one level, but on another level, look at the low-hanging fruit that's there. So this is our headroom slide where we're saying, so if these are the stalagmites, these are the stalactites. This is the low-hanging fruit where, hey, they pushed out a higher proportion of their population than we did. But if we get better at get out the votes, then we can do this. So, what I would say to you is, first of all, yes, we can sweep 6 districts this fall. Let's hit the road and do it. And then finally, I'm going to show you what it exactly looked like in each of these races. And again, the red vote and the blue vote are for aggregated candidates in the districts where we had multiple candidates. And that gray line is a really important line because that's the 50th percentile. And if we can get 50.1, except I want to do what Simon Rosenberg says and get to 55 and quit having these nail biters, right? Steve, you're applauding because you don't want nail biters either. But anyway, we're told by the experts that if a gap is 5 points or less, it's considered winnable if you have a good enough strategy. So it's totally worth it, wouldn't you say? So with presidential year turnout, we can do it again. And I think we should.